All right, let's start with the big story that we are tracking this hour, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi has arrived in the historic city of Amman in Jordan and has been warmly greeted by the King of Jordan. Now, both the leaders had a one-on-one meeting followed by dinner that was hosted by King Abdullah II. Now, Narendra Modi will be the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Palestine. No Indian Premier had ever visited Palestine, even though India has been one of the champions of the Palestinian cause for several decades now. The Prime Minister Narendra Modi is expected to have a packed schedule for the weekend, as he will have multiple meetings with various leaders. Now, the Indian community and businessmen as well will also be meeting with the Indian Prime Minister. And of course, the first engagement of the Prime Minister after his arrival in Ramallah will be to lay a wreath at the mausoleum of Yasser Arafat, the legendary Palestinian leader. The Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be accompanied by Prime Minister of Palestine Rami Hamdullah. All right, so this is a visit with far-reaching consequences. This is, of course, the first time that an Indian Prime Minister is visiting Palestine. And to discuss the implications of this visit, we are joined in by a panel. We've got Dr. Mehdi Abdul Hadi, who's the chairman of the Palestinian Academic Society for the Study of International Affairs, who's joining us from Jerusalem. Thank you very much indeed, sir. And also in the studio, we are joined by Ambassador Arun Singh. You have served as a former ambassador to the United States. Thank you very much indeed. Let me begin with you, Ambassador. Now, you know, when you talk about diplomacy, the manner in which Narendra Modi has been pushing forth his Middle East outreach. First, he visited the state of Israel, he established relations there, and now he is visiting Palestine. How significant do you think this is?
So clearly, the Prime Minister and the government since 2014 has been putting a lot of emphasis relations with the countries in the Middle East, with Gulf, West Asia, right. Israel, Palestine. He's made several visits. He's been to the United Arab Emirates. He's been to Qatar. He's visited Iran. He's visited Israel. So I think in the framework of all that and in itself, right, the visit to Palestine is clearly very, very significant. And as you mentioned, this is the first visit ever of an Indian Prime Minister to Palestine. And at another level, it's not surprising, because after the establishment of Israel in 1948, till 1967, the area that we understand as Palestine and the international community understands as Palestine had been under Jordan's control.
That's true.
And after that, it came under Israeli occupation. India recognized the Palestinian state only in 1988.
That's true.
And in 1992, we established full diplomatic relations with Israel. Now, since the area has been under Israeli occupation, it would have been difficult for an Indian Prime Minister to visit Palestine unless he also visited Israel. Right. So with the visit to Israel having happened in 2017, it is certainly now possible for the Indian Prime Minister, either he could have combined it at that time or now to make a separate standalone visit. And since the area is under Israel's occupation and security control, you cannot go there without the concurrence of the Israeli authority.
Without the concurrence of Israel. We'll discuss the implications of this in just a bit. Meanwhile, we're also joined by Dr. Mehdi Abdul Hadi, who is, of course, joining us from Jerusalem. Dr. Mehdi, you know, this is in many ways being looked at very significantly in India. How is the visit of, you know, the Indian Prime Minister being viewed there in Palestine?
The question is not a visit or historical visit. The question is the political, economical, security position of India vis-a-vis the conflict.
Right.
Palestinians were obsessed with the idea of history and culture. We go back to the early days of Indira Gandhi and Mahatma Gandhi and Nehru and Nasser, Jamal Abdel Nasser. We are told our relationship goes back to the history, but facts on the ground today, you come to see India in a close relationship with Israeli, millions of billions of dollars for arms sale, and nothing concerning Jerusalem or Palestine or a Muslim community. You have millions of Muslim, Indian, has nothing yet relationship with Jerusalem, with Al-Quds al-Sharif, or translation of the recognition of the state of Palestine in 1988 to reality on the ground.
Right.
We don't see any visible action or activities or project by Indian government or people or institutions or universities vis-a-vis Palestine.
No, Dr. Mehdi, point well taken. But you also will recognize that in the year 1988, India was the first non-Arab nation that recognized Palestine when it declared statehood. And you'd also recognize that in the month of December in the UNGA, when Donald Trump, in fact, recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, India voted against that proposal. So is that not sort of India's position in terms to the Arab-Israeli conflict there?
Fine. You recognize, but you don't translate the recognition to reality on the ground. You condemned and you opposed Trump policy on Jerusalem, yet you don't recognize Jerusalem as capital of Palestine.
Right.
Yet you have millions of Muslim Indian don't come to Jerusalem to maintain, to protect, to preserve the holy site of Al-Aqsa Mosque. You have a huge gap of relationship. It's not only wording here or statement there or diplomatic position. It's reality on the ground. You never condemned settlement and colonization and Israeli atrocities against Palestinians. You just mentioned
actually that will be contested, Dr. Mehdi.
Palestinians were killed
Dr.
by
Mehdi,
Israelis.
because the illegal encroachment settlements that has been condemned in the past by India as a stated position. Let me bring in Ambassador Arun Singh here. Do you agree with this view? Could India have done more? Because we've taken a very principled, moral approach, something that we have come under criticism, because we've stayed away from Israel. It was only in the last 2 decades that we've moved closer towards the state of Israel, considering that the reality of the Middle East has changed. It's not the reality of the 1960s. In 2018, there are different compulsions, and India has still taken a very, many would say, an independent and a moral stand.
So I understand the emotions and sentiments behind some of the comments that have been made, although I differ with the assessment. And I think India's approach has been that, recognizing the complexity of the situation, we build strong bilateral relations both with Israel and with the Palestinians. But on the Israel-Palestine issue, we maintain our position.
That's true.
So historically, we voted at the UN for recognizing the right of self-determination of the Palestinians. We have, as you mentioned in December, voted on the issue of Jerusalem. So, and then we voted to have Palestine as a member of UNESCO.
Right.
We voted for Palestine to be a non-member state of the UN.
That's true.
So in terms of the issues, we maintained our principled position. But at the same time, we work to improve our bilateral relationship both with Israelis and Palestinians. And our assessment is the more we are able to do that, the more we will be able to contribute to positive movement in the processes. But if you're looking at it from the Israeli perspective, they would like India to do more from their point of view. If you look at it from the Palestinian perspective, they would like India to do more from their point of view. But ultimately, India must do more from the Indian point of view.
That's true, because India must pursue its interest. Dr. Mehdi, if I can bring you in on this. The fact of the matter is, India has always taken a very moral and an independent standpoint. The fact that India's relationship with Israel has progressed, so has the relationship of the other Arab nations surrounding the state of Israel. They have also improved their relationship. The fact that Israel is a nation that is here to stay is something that has to be acknowledged. But perhaps what needs to be done is that a two-state solution, like recognized under the United Nations, this is something that the nations there should try and make their efforts towards. Do you not agree with that assessment?
You can do any assessment, you can do any perspective. We have different reading of the current situation. But from a Palestinian independent perspective, I'm telling you what we feel, what we believe in. We have been under occupation for the last 50 years. Suddenly, unexpectedly, we come to see your Prime Minister embracing Netanyahu, launching with him a huge, unexpected millions of dollars of arms sale and receiving Netanyahu in India. At the same time, we don't see any visible Indian presence in Jerusalem or in Palestine or supporting developing the Palestinian state building. And this is the gap we are talking about. We don't mind that you have your own interests vis-a-vis arms sale and business with Netanyahu and embracing settlers here and there. But by the end of the day, where is your ethics and values and principle vis-a-vis the Palestinian rights for statehood, for independence, for ending occupation, and for sharing open city of Jerusalem? I don't see Indian Muslim people coming to Jerusalem and praying in Al-Aqsa Mosque and saying this is an Islamic site. This is an Islamic holy place. I don't see this in the making because your government is taking totally different perspective vis-a-vis arms sale and security issues. Today we are facing a new chapter of this impasse. A war Israel is launching in Syria, in Yemen, in Libya, military visible Israeli presence all over the region, and you are supporting this kind of colonization?
Right. Dr. Mehdi, I think you've raised a few important points. You want to comment on this?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a few things that India in its own way has been contributing to state building capacity in Palestine. And we have to be mindful of the limits of our capacity.
That is
so
true.
within
That's
that, we have contributed to capacity building. We have contributed to schools, to libraries. We've contributed in setting up an information communication technology center. So areas where we feel that we have some competitive advantage, areas where we feel that we can share based on our experience and helps to contribute to capacity building in Palestine, we've done that. And we've also contributed off and on for relief and rehabilitation efforts there. So that is something that we've certainly been doing. And as I reiterated on the issues involved on the Israel-Palestine aspect, we have maintained our position. On the subject of settlements, we have been critical of that. We had voted at the UN critical of the construction of the separation wall that Israel had done for security reasons from their point of view. And our formal position remains support for the situation as it existed in 1967.
That's an important thing. Now, Dr. Mehdi, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that Prime Minister Narendra Modi, despite the camaraderie and the rapport that he shares with the Israeli Prime Minister, this time round he is visiting Ramallah without making a stop in Tel Aviv. Does that not send a message across that India is seeking to balance its interest in an area that is extremely complex?
We were very much concerned with his presence in Tel Aviv. We were very much concerned with Netanyahu present in India. We were very much concerned when he was here in the occupied territories because all Palestine has been occupied. Not one word, not one position vis-a-vis the Palestinians. Today, we would love to see him condemning settlement, condemning the war, condemning the closure of Jerusalem, condemning the escalation, the confrontation, the killing of the youth in Palestine. Today, we would like to see his clear position, not only in Amman and Ramallah, but in the public opinion that India message to the world, we are here for justice, for equal justice, for ending occupation. This is what we would like to hear and to see.
That is something that we'll have to... I'll give you the last word, Ambassador.
Very briefly to say that many other countries that have a very close association with the Palestine issue, for example, if you take Jordan and Egypt, they have diplomatic relations with Israel. And many of the other Arab countries that don't recognize Israel formally, they also are reaching out to build some linkages, some processes with Israel, recognizing that the global situation in the Middle East is changing. So we have to be mindful of that.
So it's going to be an interesting visit. We'll await for the details. It'll be interesting to see as to what the Prime Minister will, of course, be saying when he is in Ramallah. I thank both my guests, to Ambassador Arun Singh and also to Dr. Mehdi Hassan for having joined us on this broadcast. And also Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be visiting the Yasser Arafat Museum when he lands in Ramallah for a day's visit to pay his tributes to the tallest leader of the Palestinian national movement who rests at the very same premises. The WION's correspondent Daniel Pagani gets you a glimpse of the museum just ahead of the Indian Prime Minister's visit.
This place where we are right now is the place where Yasser Arafat and his presidential guard, the people most faithful to his position, remained for 34 months during the siege, from 2001 to 2004. This, here, where we are right now, was the office of the person who is still considered one of the most important figures in modern Palestine, one of the persons who kept alive the idea of Palestine, and certainly one of the persons who is very much entrenched within the history of India and Palestine, because it was with him that first India tied up to understand and then to recognize the existence of Palestine. We can imagine how hard it was, 34 months. This is underground, so you need to basically live underground all the time, so there are no windows, as you can see. Every activity of the life of this person and the person guarding him was happening here. the kitchen. The kitchen. You can understand what it means to live underground for 34 months. 34 months is a very, very long time. And it was during this siege that the beginning of the end of Arafat happened. They lived here. They tried to protect, they tried to continue to struggle for what was their cause, the existence of the state of Palestine. Practically, physically, what it meant for the Presidential Guard. The Presidential Guard was a selected small military corps which was demanded to protect day and night, 24/7, Yasser Arafat. This is where they lived. Kalashnikovs are still there, representing the fact that they had to be always ready, gas masks, everything they needed for any military action. They were expecting someone to come here to chase their leader.
All right, now, besides Palestine, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will also be visiting the United Arab Emirates, and this has been covered extensively in the Emirates' national newspapers. Now, WION's Nishtita Virendra brings you this report.
Well, Mr. Narendra Modi has been one of the biggest newsmakers across the world ever since he became the Prime Minister of India. And as he's set to visit the UAE this evening, the papers reflect how big a newsmaker he really is. Multiple articles on the Prime Minister's visit. This is his 3-nation tour, and today he's expected to arrive in Abu Dhabi, where he will be given a grand welcome reception at the Presidential Palace and will also sign some crucial agreements and MOUs. Let's just take you through some of the newspapers here. One of the prime newspapers here, Gulf News, has gone on to report an article that says a rousing welcome on the cards for Modi. Well, let's not forget that when the first time the Prime Minister visited UAE back in 2015, a crowd of almost 50,000 people had gathered in Dubai to just hear the Prime Minister speak. Of course, this time around the crowd is slightly smaller, just about 2,000 people at the Dubai community event. But there will be a huge crowd in Muscat in Oman, where nearly 25,000 people, mainly of the Indian community, are expected to gather to hear the Prime Minister speak. So certainly a rousing welcome on the cards. But this particular visit of the Prime Minister is much more than that. It's much more than for the Indian expat community. It is also crucial for the interaction that he will have with the Deputy Supreme Commander as well as the Prime Minister in both Abu Dhabi and Dubai. So let's go to the next article that has been published here. A big article that says that has a headline that says energy trade high on Modi's agenda in Middle East tour. Well, it has been repeatedly said in the last few days as to how the closeness between UAE and India, the growing closeness, is an indication as to how the two countries are moving beyond their traditional buyer-seller relationship. Their bilateral relations have grown manifold and have gone into sectors like space and education and also science and technology and research. So keeping all these factors in mind, this particular article details the kind of agreements that are expected to be signed, and also talks about how crucial it is for UAE investment to come in for India's infrastructure development. Let's not forget that nearly $75 billion is what was promised to India. About $1 billion has come in from UAE government, and then a few private entities have also started putting in money for India's infrastructure development. But it's not just the articles in the papers here, it's also full-page advertisements welcoming the Prime Minister. Well, the Indian expat community here going all out. This particular ad is given out by a private group that is owned by an Indian here in the UAE, and it's a full-page article that says, hearty welcome Shri Narendra Modi, Honorable Prime Minister of India. There is also another advertisement in the same paper that says, welcome Shri Narendra Modi, and it goes on to show the level of excitement that is really there, especially among the Indian community here in the UAE. They are numbering at almost 3.3 million according to official figures, and that is not just the biggest expatriate community in UAE, but also the biggest expatriate community overall in any country across the world. So certainly an excited lot, and they're looking forward to this visit, particularly because also their long-standing dream of having a temple in Abu Dhabi is going to come true. In Abu Dhabi, with video journalist Neeraj Patel, Nischita, WION.